When Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas premiered in October 1993, it did so with surprisingly little fanfare for a film developed by Disney. It was only after the film left theaters that it began a transition from beloved cult movie to cultural phenomenon. The story of how this creepy classic came about is just as interesting as the film itself. Here's the untold truth of The Nightmare Before Christmas. It comes from a poem. Burton originally penned the movie's story as a poem when he was working as an animator for Disney, which he likened to being stuck in a prison. Burton could never adapt to the style preferred by Disney, which became clear to him while working on the 1981 feature The Fox and the Hound, saying, "I couldn't draw those four-legged Disney foxes. Mine look like roadkills." Burton left Disney, but kept in touch with another struggling animator, Henry Selick. Burton shared his haunting poem about a skeletal figure named Jack Skellington with Selick, who showed immediate interest in directing a feature version. Production started in 1991, but not without some trouble. Selick didn't even have a full script in the beginning. All he had was Burton's best wishes and a few of Danny Elfman's songs to go on. Disney got scared. Disney initially considered turning Burton's holiday-themed poem into a TV special or a short film similar to Vincent, a 1982 short film also based on a Burton poem, but it backed out. The success of 1988's Beetlejuice and 1990's Edward Scissorhands gave Burton enough negotiating power to arrange a deal with Disney, and the project was finally greenlit, with Burton acting as the go-between for the studio and his director. But after seeing the first trailer, then Chairman CEO Michael Eisner decided that The Nightmare Before Christmas was just too dark for Disney. The film was sent away from the kids' table to Touchstone Pictures, where Disney kept content they didn't want associated with their child-friendly brand. What's wrong with disembodied legs and children with sewn shut eyes anyhow? Isn't that basically their slogan? Filming took over 3 years. Hailing from before the days of slick CGI, the effort that went into making The Nightmare Before Christmas was intense. The film was shot at 24 frames per second, which meant that the characters had to be repositioned 24 times for every second of film. It took a whole week to create just a single minute of footage, and 8 camera crews worked at once. It wasn't just a case of nudging a figurine slightly either. The characters had to be carefully disassembled and reassembled for every frame, so their facial expressions matched what was happening on screen. The Pumpkin King had more than 400 interchangeable heads alone. Oogie Boogie was trouble. Despite being a burlap sack filled with creepy crawlies, Nightmare's antagonist Oogie Boogie was actually the hardest character to create. His complex demise in the film was particularly tricky to navigate, consisting of 4 shots that each took a full month to make. Not only that, but the metal armature inside the huge figure was so strong that animators had to get behind it and push it into place for each shot. So it's no wonder he's barely in the film.
Well, what have we here? Santa Claus, huh? Ooh, I'm really scared.
Some viewers also felt that Kim Page's portrayal of the villain verged on racist. Selick defended the character, insisting that Page modeled his voice performance on Cab Calloway. This argument is supported by the fact that some lines of dialogue are lifted directly from the 1933 Betty Boop cartoon, The Old Man of the Mountain, starring Calloway.
What you gonna do now?
Gonna do the best I can.
What are you going to do?
I'm gonna do the best I can.
Composer Danny Elfman has a long history of channeling Calloway as well, as he did in the 1980 film Forbidden Zone.
Well, son, let me tell you, I'm so pleased to meet you. The boys and I've been expecting to greet you.
Best Friends for Never. All of Jack Skellington's songs were composed and sung by Oingo Boingo frontman Danny Elfman himself. That's Nightmare Trivia 101. But Elfman also recorded all the Pumpkin King speaking parts too. While he nailed the singing, Elfman's voice acting just wasn't up to Selick's standards. And in the end, Burton and Selick decided they would have Chris Sarandon re-record the scenes. Elfman took it badly, refusing to score Burton's next film, Ed Wood. Elfman still got his speaking voice in the film, kind of. The world-renowned composer also voiced the clown with the tearaway face and Beryl, the smallest of Oogie Boogie's miniature henchmen.
Whatever you say, Jack.
Creator cameos. In the end, Elfman's voice being in the movie just wasn't enough, and he had the animators create a shrunken version of his head and hide it inside a cello. Tim Burton's severed head was also supposed to appear in the film's finale as a hockey puck, but the projectile was changed to a jack-o'-lantern at the last moment. Rumor has it that Disney deemed the inclusion of their former employee's head a step too far and leaned on Selleck to change it. Doctor in Disguise. The biggest reveal from the unearthed storyboards was a twist ending. When Oogie Boogie's sack starts to unravel, it isn't just worms and spiders that come spilling out. Dr. Finkelstein is in there too.
Yes, Jack Skellington, it's me. Me, the man who created Sally from bits of flesh and scraps of cloth. But she loves you, Jack, you oblivious twit.
A defiant Finkelstein explains he wanted to teach Sally a lesson before declaring his intentions to make a new creation and disappearing through a trapdoor. The Doctor's gross new creation can be seen in the film's finale. Why anyone would choose a wife that looked exactly like themselves is anyone's guess. But those reasons are probably pretty weird. Lost voices. Like Chris Sarandon, many of the film's voices weren't the creator's original choices. Burton had worked with Vincent Price on 2 productions prior to Nightmare, but their collaboration on Nightmare had to be called off unexpectedly. Price came into the studio to record the voice of Santa, but when the veteran actor was too depressed after losing his wife, they were forced to consider alternatives. James Earl Jones had discussions with Elfman that ended in an angry shouting match. In the end, Ed Ivory, a relative unknown, was entrusted with the part. Patrick Stewart was also brought on to Nightmare early on in its development, recording a film-length adaptation of the poem.
I'm sick of the scaring, the terror, the fright. I'm tired of being something that goes bump in the night.
In the end, it was decided that the opening verses would be better recited by the film's Santa, and the Stewart version ended up on the cutting room floor, DVD extras, and the film's official soundtrack. Horror veteran Christopher Lee also read the full-length poem for the film, but was also ultimately cut to his disappointment.
I'm sick of the scaring, the terror, the fright. I'm tired of being something that goes bump in the night.
But as we all know, Lee is no stranger to being stabbed in the back. Skeleton babies. The last that Jack and old Sandy Claus see of each other is when Santa flies out of sight, leaving Halloween Town under a blanket of snow. In an unused epilogue scene, however, Santa reveals that he actually visited his old friend Jack years after their holidays disastrously crossed paths and found him with a handful of musically inclined children by his side.
So, many years later, I thought I'd drop in. And there was old Jack, still looking quite thin, with 4 or 5 skeleton children at hand, playing strange little tunes in their xylophone band.
Those kids actually sound a lot like Oingo Boingo, now that we think about it. There's kind of a sequel and a prequel. In the mid-2000s, Capcom released a video game called Oogie's Revenge, which takes place after the events of the film. Jack gets bored with his life again, Oogie is sewn back together by his trio of henchmen, and the burlap sack decides he wants to be the king of all holidays, not just Halloween. The game ends pretty much identically to the film, with Oogie once again defeated and Jack once again rededicated to his true calling of Halloween. No one said it was a great story, but there's a video game prequel also. The Pumpkin King, released at the same time as the sequel, actually explains the huge gaps in the film's continuity. The conflict and jealousy between Jack and Oogie is explored, as well as exactly why Oogie has to live underground in his lair. Spoiler alert, it's because, once again, he lost a fight with Jack. Jack's cameos. Burton has declared he'll never create a real The Nightmare Before Christmas sequel, especially not one where Jack goes to Arbor Day Town or something.
Excuse me, is this Hanukkah Town?
No, it's the Vatican, and I'm Pope Slum.
But that didn't stop Selleck from returning to the character twice. In his 1996 adaptation of Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach, the brigade of mutant insects face off against Jack as a pirate, with one even declaring, well...
A skeleton?
The skeletal master of horror does his job pretty well, but that's not even his only cameo. Selleck's 2009 stop-motion film Coraline evokes Nightmare in a number of ways, though those with a keen eye were able to spot a direct reference. As Coraline's mother cracks eggs over a bowl, Jack's grinning skull can be seen inside one of the dripping yolks. It's almost a literal Easter egg, but it's so quick it's easy to miss. Others, not so much. Bunny! Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.